There's a level of honor. So you understand that you're representing it's not me. I'm just a representative of the Dallas Police Department. And the person that has served this city, risked their lives and their loved ones sitting there, and you just want to convey to them how much their sacrifice was appreciated. We're standing there and they line up all the honor guards. Well, you can imagine when a chief of police of a police department dies and they have a line of duty service, how many departments are there? So we're going through the service and they line up and say, okay, all honor guards over here. So we all line up and I line up and I look down the line to my left, honor guard, honor guard, honor guard. I look at my patch, tactical. Look to my right, honor guard, honor guard, honor guard. And I go, what in God's name? It's the largest police department in the entire Metroplex not have an honor guard.
So on that one, I called my squad leader. Well, I called my squad leader and said I couldn't do it. I was like, I'm not going to be able to hold myself together, right? So I went to some of the training, and I'm like, because I wanted to do it. And when they were practicing with the casket and everything, I sat out there and watched it, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to keep myself together on this one.
5 or 6 years, I called the roll call of honor. And you'd look up and you'd try to find the family member of the person you just called, and you just see them grow. It was just, that was the heartbreaking part of realizing these people lost their loved one forever.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal.
And we can learn from those mistakes.
And together we can bridge the divide.
Time to come home, dear brother. Your tour of duty through. You've given as much as anyone could be expected to do. Just a few steps further, the smoke will start to clear. Others here will guide you. You have no need of fear. You have not failed your brothers. You clearly gave it all. And through your selfless actions, others will hear the call. So take your place of honor among those who have gone before, and now you will be remembered for now and evermore. A Hero's Welcome by Robert Longley. In preparation to tell this story, this poem resonated with me, as I truly wanted to honor the fallen. But I also wanted to highlight the men and women who serve selflessly in the honor guard. Anyone whoever has witnessed a memorial service for military or first responder personnel who died in the line of duty has been struck by the magnitude, the symbolism of the event. Being part of the event is a sacred and heavy burden to bear for those who wear the Honor Guard uniforms and who must perform with the utmost precision and reverence and respect. This episode will take the listener back when the Dallas Police Department had no Honor Guard. We will detail the way it was and the way it is, as we have come a long way to honor our fallen and their families. From the preparation to the duties of the pallbearer, the salute, the firing party, to the ceremony of carefully folding the flag that once draped the coffin before it is handed over to the fallen's family. And to tell this story, we have the people who were at the ground zero for making this idea come to fruition for the Dallas Police Department. SWAT Sergeant Joe Denomy had a vision for the Dallas Police Honor Guard. And like all new tasks, there come a lot of headaches and roadblocks. But as with anything, where there's a will, there's a way to making a dream become reality. This is the reality of the Dallas Police Honor Guard's history. It's the ATO's honor to welcome on retired SWAT Sergeant Joe Denomy, Senior Corporal Reed Higgins, Deputy Chief Jeremy Foy, and the great Kent Wolverton's here with us. And we're going to be talking about the history of the Honor Guard, how it started, the way it was before the Honor Guard, because Dallas PD, I don't believe we really had anything established that was the standard for honoring our fallen and their families. So I want to start with Joe. Tell the listener a little bit about yourself, how long you spent with DPD, and where you served.
Yeah, I hired on in April of 1978, graduated in July, and was fortunate to be sent to Central Patrol. Spent a couple of years there till I was drafted to communications. Went there, spent my year that they normally did back then because they didn't ask you, they just came and got you. Got to go back to Central, and after about 5 years there, I decided to take the sergeant's exam, passed it, and was promoted in 1985. And the chiefs thanked me and sent me back to communications. And I am the last sergeant to ever, only because they were going to mandatory 2 years in communications. I got out in a year, snuck under the wire. One of the chiefs threw the memo or threw the transfer in the trash and never told anybody, threw it in the trash. And the lieutenant called down to communications, says, "Hey, can Joe come down before, because I know he's going to promote in a week." And they delayed him 3 weeks. So I'd already been at Central 3 weeks when they sent other sergeants there, and I'd already been there for 2 weeks. So I got around to that. Then in 89, I transferred to SWAT, spent from 89 to 2004 running the squad. Then I went to the planning division. Went from there, they disbanded the planning unit, and I went to North Central for 6 months. Then I went to personnel for 2 years, and then the SWAT called again, and I went back as a training sergeant, and that's where I was when I retired.
What year was that you retired?
2014.
Okay. Reed Higgins, tell the listener a little bit about your career and where you ended up.
Well, I was born at the sanitarium in Waxahachie, Texas, and no, there wasn't anything wrong with my mother. That was just what it was called. Grew up in Oak Cliff, attended Baylor University. I came to work in 74, went to Southwest Patrol. About 81, I went to traffic as an accident investigator, and then I transitioned over to hit and run unit. Went back to the academy and taught the PVOC, or whatever it's called now, the driving, first aid, CPR. Then I came to personnel as the family services officer and was there 11 years. Retired in 2013, did 38 years.
So the family services officer, I want you to kind of explain that, because I know John Lumley does it now, and you deal directly with the families, the setting up funerals. Is that right?
The setting up of the funeral, meet with the family at the funeral home, kind of a lot to it. Contact all the units that will be involved, Honor Guard, motors, things like that. Work a lot with the funeral directors, and then when it's all over and done, then we file the paperwork for state and federal benefits.
That's a lot of emotion to take on, Reed.
It's the best job and the worst job I ever had, all rolled into one. Met some great people, but under very unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah, I don't know that I could do that. I see how Lumley does it now, and do not wish that on anybody who's taken over after he leaves. And did Lumley take over after you left? You know?
No, Mike Williams was in there
Yep,
for a couple of years, I guess, and then John came over. John had always helped me with funerals and was kind of the logical choice up there. John's doing a great job.
Yeah, it's a lot to take on. That's a long time for you to do that.
330-something funerals.
So speaking of the service and how this all began, this whole episode was put together. Chief Foy and I just had a conversation one day. I wanted to do a story on how it all started with the Honor Guard here in Dallas. I've watched from afar and admired the work that they do and the precision that they have when they're doing their duties to serve and honor the fallen and their families. And it's tough. I could not do it because the emotion that's involved. But I've seen several friends. Chief Foy has run it for several years. When I told Foy that I had an idea to do basically a history lesson and tribute to the Honor Guard, he said, "We got to get Joe Denomy here."
Well, thank you.
So, Chief Foy, if anybody wants to hear more about him, go listen to episode 22. He doesn't have the cowboy music. We're going to rectify that with this episode. Guys, y'all ready to get into this?
You bet.
The Honor Guard traces its beginning to May of 1948, when the newly formed Air Force headquarters, they were instructed to develop plans for an elite ceremonial unit comparable to those to other armed services. Squadron in September 1948, they had an authorized strength of 98 enlisted 2 officers. I believe it was General MacArthur that had a hand in getting that going. There's many titles that they go by. Guard of Honors, the English Commonwealth. Honor Guard is American English. It's also referred to as Ceremonial Guard. I'm going to hand the ball off to Joe. I kind of want you to just walk us through what was it like as far as the funeral and the structure of these services pre-Honor Guard.
Pre-Honor Guard, I can go back to John Pasco's funeral.
Okay.
That was the first one I saw, first one I attended. And I remember watching it being done and seeing the level of professionalism the guys that were doing it. Was really impressed that they did a great job watching from the outside. So I had zero Honor Guard experience. I wasn't in the military. I wasn't anything, so I had no background on how they did anything. And then over the years, the next one that I attended was John Chase. And that was probably more emotional because his locker was 2 lockers away from mine. And a short story is my partner was Jack Means. And when he was coming out of communications, he was the one officer on Central 3rd Watch that I told him, this is the guy you need to work with. Superhuman being. So that was a really emotional situation. And in that one, I got to see the motors work. And then I was just really impressed with how that was done. Still have no idea of how it was being done or what it was being done while they were doing it. But it was just impressive to watch, especially when they shut down the freeway and we're the only ones on it. That was just awesome. And we're headed out to the airport to go out. It's an incredible experience. So 89, I got transferred over to SWAT, tactical at that time. Found out one of the duties is Honor Guard. Says, oh, that's cool. So I get my first funeral, and it says, well, how do we do this? I don't know. How do you do it? I don't know. So you start asking around. There was no manuals. There was no book. There was no, you do this, you do that. It says, okay, well, what do we do? And basically ad hoc, we get our squad together. It's okay, the funeral director would tell us what we need to do, and then we'd figure out how to do it. There was nothing written, nothing that says, we can figure it out. And they did. And that went on with line of duty funerals, everything like that. Every one was a new adventure. They're still a new adventure, but now there's a little bit more guidance with them. But because, as you know, you got your plan, you planned for the plan you did and the plan you should have done. And that goes with every single funeral. But over the years, I started seeing that this was something that officers were having to do, not something they wanted to do. And you would be at a funeral and you could feel that emotion from people in the crowd that were glad that we were there, but you had officers that didn't want to be there. And it's kind of like when you watch a marching band, the only one you see is the one out of step. Well, if you have one guy at the funeral that's got that sour attitude on his face, is why the heck do I have to be there? Because it's a difficult situation. It's not something everybody's comfortable or wants to be at. And no one goes to SWAT because they get to be on the honor guard. They go to SWAT to knock down doors and chase bad guys and do stuff like that. The honor guard was just something they had to do. So the answers I would get from command staff says, why don't we have an honor guard? I says, well, because SWAT looks good. We don't have to worry about them showing up being fat and out of shape. And that was their only response all around. Well, they look good. And every time I brought it up, they look good. So I went on, I went in 89. So let's see, Chief Wyndham's funeral was in 2000. So from 1989 to 2000, that's every officer that died in there. We had some role in it. Later on, we did Police Memorial Day and stuff like that. So we were doing all the honor guard ad hoc. Okay, at that time, Gene Hagan would call up, say, hey, we've got a funeral. It says, okay, you got it. So we would do it. Well, the moment of epiphany was Chief Wyndham passed away. And so they had his funeral over in Fort Worth. And myself and two other officers were at that funeral. And we're still there, and just how professional they lined things up. Fort Worth had, I don't like their honor guard uniforms. I think they've changed them since then, but they all had the same uniform, and it was different from everything that every police officer was wearing. So when they showed up, you knew that's the honor guard. You didn't have to guess as well. That's something. So we're standing there. We do the church service, and we go out graveside. We're standing there, and they line up all the honor guards. Well, you can imagine when a chief of police of a police department dies, and they have a line of duty service, how many departments are there? So we're going through the service, and they line up. Says, okay, all honor guards over here. So we all line up, and I line up, and I look down the line to my left. Honor guard, honor guard, honor guard. I look at my patch, tactical. Look to my right, honor guard. Honor guard, honor guard. And I go, what in God's name? It's the largest police department in the entire Metroplex not have an honor guard. So I started getting mad. Well, at that funeral, the ceremony goes on. They lift the flag up, play taps, fold the flag. Well, during that time, they do present arms. Well, someone in Fort Worth did not say order arms. So I had a lot of time to think while I'm standing there at attention and watching people melt like they're in a wax museum, because it was at least a half hour at Present Arms, and everything's cramping up, and I'm sitting there thinking, there's just got to be a better way. So I'm getting mad, and then watching all these people. I wish at the time I would just yelled order arms and had everybody put their arms down, because it was embarrassing to watch all the people. So I get in my car, and I'm driving back, and at that time I was working closely with Kevin King. And he was designing the Dallas Police Memorial that was going to be downtown. They were raising money, stuff like that. And I called him up, and I told him what was going on. I says, can we make an honor guard? He says, yeah, we can do it. Says, I'll help you. Because, sometimes you need support from the public outside and inside. And he had retired from then, was doing something else with real estate. So that kind of started. So that started the ball rolling. The next probably year, I spent just researching. I'd call every police department. Do you have an honor guard? How big are they? When do they train? How do they do all their stuff? Do you have the thing? But the biggest advantage was we had Arlington PD, and Reed will back me up on this. So police would call up and say, hey, I need an honor guard for our banquet. Says, well, if you want the best one, call Arlington. We did it part-time, and it was SWAT. So he would call and say, call Arlington. They'll do it. So one of my first ventures was over to Arlington Police Department to talk to their director of their honor guard. And I went over there, and we sat down, and I stole every piece of paper they would give me. So all the manuals, all the things, and it turns out they went, Chief Kunkel was their chief at the time, let them go to Washington, D.C. and train with the old guard. So one of the problems you get with honor guards is you get Marines, you get Army, you get Navy, and everybody has little things. But no one can say, oh, you trained with the old guard? Oh, well, then that's it. That's the way we're doing it, because they're considered the best. And so I did all my proposal, did everything, and I did a presentation. I put a whole PowerPoint together and went up the monthly chiefs meeting, all the chiefs from the building. And Chief Bolton God, I can't believe I couldn't remember that name, because it was stuck. Chief Bolton was and my God, the response I got was just outstanding. Wow, this is a great idea. I can't believe nobody thought of it before. And I just got the green light. It says, go ahead. Everything that I propose, sending 8 officers to Washington, D.C., doing all the training, selecting the officers, going on, go for it. So $16,000 later, we had 8 officers, and we went to Washington, D.C., trained for 4 days with the old guard. We took all the manuals they would give us, all the training they had, the types of rifles and stuff like that, and brought it back to the police department. So that's phase 1. So I'm actually go back just a little bit. In that initial meeting, one of the chiefs looks at me and says, so when you get all this training, who's going to take over the honor guard? And I looked her right in the eye. I said, I am. And I remember her look was, no, you're lying to me. You're not doing this. And I'm kind of foreshadowing, because this comes into play later on. So I get all the work. It's rolling. I think, Reed, you were up there at that time. It's rolling hard. We're going through, so I get a call. Come to the chief's office. We're ready to go. But I'm excited. I walk in the room, and no one will make eye contact. All the chiefs, no one make eye contact. And I always go back to the George Gobel on Johnny Carson, where he said, you ever feel all the world's a tuxedo and you're a pair of brown shoes? No one to make eye contact. And Chief Bolton wouldn't even make eye contact when he looked down at the ground and says, we've decided to let TAC keep it. I went, what? He says, yeah, we're just going to keep doing it the way we've been doing it. I said, seriously? Yeah, and there was no wiggle room. I didn't get to argue, say any points one way or the other. It was just, that's it. That was the end. We set $16,000 to train 8 officers. And the initial plan, which was all written, had they read it, was those 8 officers were going to be the leaders of the squads that did the honor guard training. So those 8 officers that went out there, they weren't just trained. They were going to be squad leaders and train their squads. So you would have 4 individual squads, 2 from each, 8 total of 8, 4 squads, 8 people, and they would have been the trainers for their unit, so that we get, because that diversity actually adds to training, because you learn things from all the people. I guess no one ever read that. So I think I called Reed after that. If you've got any comments on that time.
I remember that meeting very well. And I would have liked to have known why we were going to let SWAT keep it. Nothing against SWAT, but more than once, the SWAT guys were sent. That was an assignment for them. I'd call over and talk to the lieutenant or whoever in SWAT and say, we got a retiree's funeral or whatever, and this is the time and the date. You never knew who was going to show up. You never knew what kind of attitude they'd have. 90% of the people were there for a reason, and they were okay with it. But you had the door kickers and stuff like that, and that was a waste of their time. 2 different times, and they're on duty. 2 different funerals, they got called out before they had to do the flag folding and all the services, and there's nothing you can do about that. Somebody needed them more than I did. So I learned to fold the flag pretty quick, because I seemed to be the only one there in uniform. So I'd get with the funeral director, and he'd hold the dummy in, and I'd fold the flag, and I'd present it, which did cause some problems about me presenting a lowly corporal presenting the flag. But I do remember that meeting. I remember when I got started with Gene Hagan, I got called and asked if I would like the position of Family Services Officer, and I said, yeah, whatever that is, sure. So I knew Gene Hagan had done a stalwart job in that position, but Gene was a funeral director prior to coming to work for police department, so he was very comfortable, and he knew all the funeral directors in North Texas. So I called Gene, and I said, Gene, I'm in this job now. After Gene left the department, we went to communications. I'm new at this, and I'd really like to pick your brain a little bit. So we set up a time and a place, and I showed up with my patrol spiral notebook ready to write down every word Gene had to say. Gene sat there and thought a minute, and he said, be flexible. That was our whole meeting, because you have to kind of learn to change on the fly. And I didn't know what that meant, but I learned fairly quick. Sean Byram also was involved in that. Sean came from a family of funeral directors, and Sean helped me some. But I do remember that meeting, and I didn't understand it either, but I'd been here 25 plus years, and I said, well, that's the way it is. So move on.
Now, did they give a reason for that meeting? That's just the way it was, and you just
Yeah, at that time,
got kicked out, and that was it.
We'll get to the part of the story where I found out why, but I really got to give a shout out to Gene Hagen, because everything we do, he was the foundation of everything. That funeral director, I believe he was sent by God to the Dallas Police Department to take on this role, to give us a level of professionalism that we needed. He did it by accident. He was at the emergency room when John McCarthy was brought in, and he helped carry his body into the funeral home. He was a rookie on training, and they found out he had the mortuary degree, and he was the one that helped set up the meeting. So you can see that the department at the time had no plan. Their plan was, you tell us what we need, and we'll try to figure it out. Where with Gene, we got a level of professionalism, but the flexibility was there, that he had the knowledge of where people should sit. I mean, the logistics of a funeral is just overwhelming. And unless you understand all the logistics, things just look haphazard. And I can't say enough praise, because I worked with him a lot on funerals that I had to do when Gene was in that family services unit. And you never had to worry, because if you had something come up wrong, you just go, Gene, what do we do here? And you do this. Okay, we'll do this. And there's just his professionalism and his caring. The amount of emotion and caring he did for the officers was great.
When you said that SWAT are tactical, that was part of their duty, and they did it because they had to do it. It was part of y'all the task over there. Do you just wear like just the Class A?
Right. We did have the ascots. So we had ascots and braids and white gloves, and that was about it. That was the uniform. There was nothing really distinguishing about, other than the ascot and the braids.
What kind of training did y'all have? Any training?
Yeah, when you found out you had a funeral,
it was just on the fly. Okay.
Yeah, you'd try to find something written down somewhere, because we didn't have the internet. It was back before dirt.
Yeah.
But we'd try to find somebody that was former military experience, or someone that had done one before. And, okay, as simple as, what side does the American flag go on? How do we fold this thing? All this stuff like that. So that's kind of the experience. But as time went on, so 93 or 2000 after Wyndham, and so another 4 or 5 years we were doing funerals. Well, I kept seeing mistakes, and the difference between a professional and an amateur is, an amateur makes more mistakes than a professional does. The professional doesn't eliminate mistakes; he makes few of them. So one funeral I was at, I had to stop everything because the officers were folding the flag backwards. So, and Reed's laughing over there, but it wasn't funny at the time. They were supposed to do a flyover, so I had to hold off the flyover because the flag was upside down. I was just going up, said, back it up. I had to back up the whole flag. Another one, and I won't mention the funeral, the flags were backwards, and the father was a former military. Yeah. So I had the firing team. In fact, that picture you have there, that's the firing team of that funeral. And I looked down and says, those flags aren't right. So little incidents like that. And the more personal ones were the ones where you do the retired officer funeral and the officer didn't want to be there. That just permeates the whole team. One guy just with a sour look on his face, because that is the last experience that family's going to have with the Dallas Police Department. And you don't want to leave them with the impression that somebody didn't care. And so that was kind of the impetus to keep going. So fast forward a few years, and Chief Bolton graciously left, and we got Kunkel. So I think Kunkel had been about a year in, so we're about 5 years since I did the initial presentation.
And all that training that was done back then.
Gone.
Yeah.
Well, gone in the aspect that it didn't get utilized in the way it should have been.
Okay.
So 4 or 5 years down the line, I get this phone call from Reed, and Reed says, Joe, I think it's time. I think you can redo it. So I did. I went up, and they bought in hook, line, and sinker. I mean, the whole process from Kunkel forward, if we asked for it, we got it. It was incredible. Everything from the uniforms to basically they took what I had proposed and green lighted the whole thing. So that was the start of the process down the road is coming in. So to get to your question earlier, why they quit it. So I'm in Shirley Gray's office, and I don't know if you were there, Reed, or not. But I'm sitting there with Shirley Gray, and we're getting to the final stages where we're ordering, we're getting all the stuff done. And Chief Gray says, were you in that meeting that they told us we weren't going to do this? And I said, yeah. I says, why did they quit it? Well, the story got back to us that SWAT was going to dump this job on patrol, and all the training that we did was going to be gone. I said, did anybody think to call me, ask me, or read what I wrote? Because that was the exact opposite of what he did. And that's kind of the precursor to the chief that asked me, well, who's going to do this when you're done? That was their thinking. They thought I did this so SWAT wouldn't have to. Not we were doing it because it's an honor to do it. It's not a job. It's an honor. And it just cut me to the core. It says, you boneheads.
Once you got the green light from the Kunkel administration to move forward with it, how did that look? Now you're back in business.
Back in business.
How did that selection process
So
look?
we put out a invitation to the entire police department. Anybody wanted to be on the Dallas Police Honor Guard, we filled supervisor positions first, and then we filled all the other positions after that. We had interviews, we took pictures, and we had a whole panel. Lieutenant, it was Stokes at the time. I don't know what rank he finished at, but he was the lieutenant that volunteered, and then I've got the list I can't remember all the other sergeants, but we basically had sergeants. And then once we had the sergeants, we called in the senior corporals, police officers. We didn't care about rank. It was just more, and we'll talk about why there's no rank on the Honor Guard uniform too.
And I think we had such, to me, an incredible turnout of people that wanted to do it. They were not told they were going to do it. They wanted to do it. And you didn't hear one person say, well, it's a way out of riding in the squad car all day. As far as an answer of why would you like to do this, you got those, and you got very good people.
People with a high level of experience, too.
Yeah.
You had
Lots
Marines and
of-
Air Force and Army and Navy, all brought their expertise and experience to us.
Chief, you actually were part of that.
Yeah, I was one of the recruits back then that they got. But the squad leaders were David Conley, I believe.
Yep.
Andy Harvey.
Yep.
Tom Seibel, and Vincent Lee.
Yes.
Right? And all three of those guys looked the part. And then they had put the application out. And myself, I had went to a funeral, and I thought, why is SWAT doing this? We need to have something, right? And I signed up to go. But I remember we went out to the old Reunion parking garage for the tryouts initially. And I think you had Petty, James Petty. He's a Marine drill sergeant. He's out there yelling at us and getting us to march and everything. And, of course, the Army guys are going, why are we marching like this? And the Marines are like, this is the only way to march. It was just kind of arguing.
The Air Force guys are over there eating a snack.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was a good time, and it looked like for once on the department when we're trying out that we had a standard. We were going to hold somebody, accountable to be in a unit, right? And, SWAT did tryouts, but everything else you just interview and you get the job. But this one was, hey, they're going to actually make us work for this a little bit. So it was cool.
How long did you have on at that time?
That was 2008, so 7 years.
Okay. Were you a senior corporal or still PO?
I was senior corporal at that time.
Okay. What did you look for as far as qualities when they came and interviewed?
Good humans.
Okay.
They had to look the part because that was one of the directives I got from the chiefs is they didn't want people. In fact, we set a physical standard, and we actually took a PT test, if I remember right, somewhere along the line.
We did.
Yeah. So we had physical standards because even though it doesn't look hard, you try standing in 100-degree weather for 4 hours and tell me that you can be out of shape and do that. So you train for the worst case scenario, and so we had a physical component to it, and then also their department record, and like in the interview, we found out why they wanted to do it, and those were the people we wanted. Those were the people when they showed up at a funeral, they were there for a reason, and they knew what the reason was.
Who was on that interview panel?
Stokes and all the 4 sergeants and myself. So, and then they went through a selection just like a draft. So, okay, I'll take so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. So we just went down the list. And one of the big advantages of that is now we got the diversity of the entire police department, not just the diversity of SWAT. So if you had a funeral that you needed to have a better representation, because we need to show the entire police department, not just SWAT. So we were able to draw from the entire department instead of just a handful of officers that just happened to be there at the time.
And the squad idea was a great one because you would have one squad that was casket bearers. You had one squad that was flag folders. You had one squad that was a rifle team. You didn't have the problem that we'd had before where the flag folder had to hurry and finish up and go to the back of the church, then come back because they were also carrying the casket. And it was designated people with designated jobs, and that was one of the greatest parts.
We cross-train and everything.
Yeah.
But you put your best people to be successful. You put the right people good with a rifle with the rifles. You put the heavy lifters with the casket, and everybody else, and just rolled with it. You put the best people to make the best decisions to do what they needed to do at the time.
How many people were selected for that first unit?
I think 32.
32. Wow. Okay, and they were just taken from all over.
Yeah.
Was it quite that many? Because I know we had a few people that we put on reserve status because they didn't meet height and weight requirements at the time. We let them be part of it. We wouldn't put them in a squad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but the original squads were 4 squads of 8.
Okay.
And whether we got, I can't remember back whether we filled them all to 8 at the time, but that was because an 8-man squad can handle just about any assignment at any funeral. So if you have casket bearers, you've got 8 to take care of that. You've got the firing team, you've got 8 to take care of that. So those are how the assignments are breaking up.
Did you have a lot of military, ex-military
Oh, yeah.
folks? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say over half had prior military experience.
Majority of us did.
Okay, I figured. So the uniform that y'all selected, how did that go?
That was fun.
Okay. Let's hear
So one of the things you see when you go to a funeral, Fort Worth was, I said already, I didn't like their uniforms, but you knew who they were. They had these black boots and stuff like that, but it was distinctive. And Arlington used chief coats. So the same chief coat that they use, that's what their honor guard used. So it was a dress uniform. One of the disadvantages of wearing a shirt is you move, and from the back you look like hell because your shirt keeps untucking and you look unkept, and there's no way around it. I mean, I don't care who you are, your shirt's going to come undone and you look stupid. So that played a part in the uniform. Well, since we had ex-Marines on there, and by far the best-looking uniform in my mind is that Marine dress blue. And so we augured in on that, and when we made that proposal to them, they didn't blink an eye. Okay. So that was a matter of ordering that. That's how we came up with that honor guard uniform, the stripe down the side. We toyed. There's all kinds of variables. And then the cross-shoulder strap, where with the pancake holster, that came back just to honor the past. It wasn't anything that we had to do. It just looked better with that style uniform to come with the pancake holster and the cross strap. It just added a little bit to it. Then we got the patent leather shoes, so you don't have one guy showing up in boots and another guy showing up that. So we standardized the whole uniform. So when the honor guard showed up, you knew who they were. And that was a great benefit to us because it just looked better. Then we even got honor guard badges. So you had a hat badge that said honor guard. You had a badge that said honor guard. So there was, anytime you were at any funeral anywhere, you were distinguished.
But Joe Denomy did screw up one thing on the uniform, right? It was lined with wool. The jackets were at first, right? And it took about a year, and they realized that this was not going to work, and they ordered us some new jackets that weren't lined with wool.
In Texas.
Yeah.
Well, it will work this month.
Yeah, you'd be nice and comfy right now.
They went. I was so impressed with Joe and the other sergeants, and even Stokes. The training they did. They went somewhere and got a casket.
That was A-Rod.
Yeah, I saw that, and I didn't want to ask because I didn't want to testify later.
I spoke with him recently, and yeah, he said he's the one that got that casket, and the funeral we did for Norm. We got that casket and we loaded it with 300 pounds of weight.
300 pounds of weight.
And so that was the one thing we didn't ask permission for, that we got chewed out later.
No, I remember that. I was standing. There was a row of chiefs behind me at that funeral for Norm. And they gave the order, and they lifted that casket onto their shoulders. And there was a group gasp. There was a group gasp right behind me when the chiefs saw that, because they knew who Norm was, and they knew it was heavy.
Well, Reed, they had practiced it, and one of the honor guard members, because they did a straight up press at first before they came back down, and one of the honor guard members went, "Ugh." and they heard it, and we've not ever done it since, and it probably rightfully so, because if you tweak your back muscle doing that in the middle of that, that's not a good day, right? It
sure looked good though.
It looked awesome. It looked great, but yeah, we made fun of the guy that made the groan for a long time, and he's like, "Yeah, it's heavy." He was like, "Yeah, it's 300 pounds."
Well, we knew they'd never approve it, so we asked for forgiveness. And yeah, you're right. It's never been done again.
Mm-mm. What time frame from whenever you got the go ahead to when the first detail in the first event?
Was it Norm?
Norm was the first funeral.
Yeah.
We did a bunch of colors events and stuff like that, and retiree funerals, but we hadn't done any actual line of duty funerals.
So those pictures I sent you were from the training day of October 31st. And that was our first official day. We still didn't have uniforms then. We just still used our regular uniforms. We did a training 4-day, 3-day?
We did a full week.
Full week of nothing but honor guard training for that team for that whole week. And then some of those pictures you see is the inspection we did at the end. And after that, we were up and running, and then you were on a rotating basis. So you'd have a primary and a secondary unit. So if a funeral comes up, Reed just says, "Who's primary?" and call that supervisor, and it was done.
January comes around, and then you said Norm is the
first
line of duty.
Line of duty, yeah.
Okay. How did that look? And especially for you, Jeremy, because I know your role and connection.
Right. So on that one, I called my squad leader. Well, I called my squad leader and said I couldn't do it. I was like, I'm not going to be able to hold myself together, right? So I went to some of the training, and I'm like, because I wanted to do it. And when they were practicing with the casket and everything, I sat out there and watched it, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to keep myself together on this one. So I stepped back on that first one and just watched from afar.
Joe, how did it go?
My role, so at that point I was the leader, so you don't get involved. You're more of a director. In fact, I was probably sitting next in Reed's back pocket. And like you said, that flexibility says, okay, what do we got to do here? We mapped out all the stuff we were going to do, and I knew we were going to get in trouble for that, but I just thought it was worth it. I
thought it went really well.
Yeah.
I really do.
So from my perspective, I did a few funerals after that, but mostly I was in the leadership role of making sure everything was done right, setting up training days. We got a really good working relationship with a church up in North Dallas, that we were able to practice funerals in a church. So we did all the marching down, we did all the ceremony, we taught them what to expect and what not to expect when you're doing a funeral. And I think it was once a month, or was it every 2 months?
I think it was more like once every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, so I wished it was once every 2 months. But it was kind of conducive on what would happen. So if we had a line of duty death, that would count as our training for that period, because there was no reason to get back together, because we just did what we were going to do at a training day anyways. It's live training. So the training was set up, probably quarterly.
And the training sometimes would, so for example, marching. If you're a military guy, you already know how to march. So it becomes monotonous if you already know how to do it. So you do it for a little bit, and it was nobody's fault. There's only so many things you can train for the honor guard, and then we didn't need to do it every day. We didn't need to do it every week. Every 3-4 months was adequate, especially when you're doing events in between, because anytime you do a retiree funeral, you're still going to have to march. You're still going to have to salute. So you get a little training in that just by doing it for real.
It was just like with the motorcycles. The motorcycles kind of had always had their self together about this, and I made one phone call to one of the motor sergeants over there, told him where and when and all that. They went out and ran the routes, what kind of traffic problems were they going to have, things like that. And once the honor guard got started, they didn't wait till the day of the funeral to see the church. They would go up and look at the church and the cemetery and all that, because you get different churches. Some churches have one center aisle. Some have a double center aisle that come down. And we've decided then with them, where the family was going to sit, how they were going to come in. And the guys that stood casket watch before the service, I mean, that just used to bring a lump to my throat when I'd get there an hour and a half early, and they would be there getting dressed, and
we'd practice that too.
Yeah.
Well, the plan was always to have somebody posted on that casket before the first family member ever walked in the door. So when we might have only been there 10 minutes before somebody walked in, but you were there, and it at least gives the appearance that we had been there and we were set and prepped. We didn't come out 10 minutes before the funeral started.
Well, did y'all post for the visitation at the church the night before also?
Yes.
Okay. I thought so.
Yeah, anytime we were requested. So the
Yeah.
visitations, anything like that, we showed up. But mostly it was just, for retirees, it was just the funeral itself.
Right.
Not the visitation. But for line of duty, yes, we would post officers. And even a current officer that passed away just for natural causes or whatever, we would post it at that.
I want to get into this before I forget. If you mentioned there's no rank in the honor guard
Yes.
structure, can you explain that?
So that came in. It's the part of putting people in positions where they'll succeed. So normally you get a supervisor in a rank, and he's calling the commands. You look, Sergeant, he's calling the commands. Well, I didn't want that because we had Petty. And I wanted Petty calling the commands, because that voice carries a lot of weight. When he says, hey, hup, I don't care if you don't even know, you stand up to attention. And it gave the flexibility of putting people in positions that they could do whatever they needed to be done at the time, and not worried about rank. Oh, well, he's a sergeant, he can't do that. Well, he's a corporal, he can't do that. So we kept the rank completely out of it. There wasn't even a lieutenant bar or anything on any of the uniform is clean.
I think Stokes wore the lieutenant bar, and that was just because he was the commander of the honor guard. But that was the only rank structure that we had. And
you'd see the gold badge and the silver badge, and that was the only difference.
Was that the standard for as far as other honor guards? Do you know?
I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Speaking of standards, what were the physical requirements?
Height and weight proportional. I don't know if we had an actual height and weight. That was just really we kind of went off of how you looked. It was no more, because it was a volunteer position. We could use that scrutiny. So it's not like you're counting anybody out. This is a voluntary assignment. We can make our voluntary rules, and if you don't fit them, you don't fit them.
I want to get into the ceremonies that and the presentation of colors. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's where at the beginning of all these ceremonies, the Police Memorial Day, we have the colors out there. When you have the awards banquet, we present there. All the things along the line, we present the colors. And like was alluded to, is every situation's different. Do you come down the center aisle? Do you come from the right? Do you come from the left? Everyone's different, but there is a specific order that the flags are supposed to be in, and a specific way of turning around once you get to your position. So that was something on those training days was, okay, you're coming in from the right, figure it out. Last minute we're coming in from the left. Now you're coming down the center aisle. And you'd have to work out the footwork, because it's all a timing thing, and because
stairs, trees.
I mean,
there's a tree at Police Memorial right now that if you don't practice it, if you got the flags, you're going to hit that tree, right? There's a specific place you got to turn, because if you don't, you're gonna knock the flags down. And if we don't practice it, or if they don't practice it, they're gonna do it just because you're not paying attention what's in here.
Doorways. When you lower the flag when taps is being played. All those little things, the national anthem, doing all that stuff. And of course, after you've done our guard, you watch everyone do it. And you always know that you can do it better. There's always little glitches along the line that you didn't do it exactly the way you wanted to. But everybody on that team was just doing the best they could at the time. And there's mistakes all along the line. I remember a cell phone going off during a graduation ceremony. I won't mention his name, but
Oh, I will. Nick Wingo.
brick house.
She's a brick house right there in the middle of everything, and he didn't realize it was his phone. The whole audience erupted. I was marching behind him, and you're trying to hold it together. It was great. But we called Nick Brick House for the rest of the time he was on the department.
That ringtone?
Yeah. And it was his wife calling, and since he didn't answer, she kept calling back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that. It happens. It just.
But the formation of the honor guard was such a relief in my job because, again, it took one phone call and it was done. You tell them where and when, and sometimes you didn't even have that information, but you wanted to give them a heads up so they could start getting their guys together.
As opposed to potluck SWAT. Just whoever you're going to get.
Talking about, I believe he's Sergeant Petty now, is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, my. Him calling the commands, I used to have to do that if there was nobody there to do it, because you would ask a sergeant who you knew that was there or lieutenant, would you call the commands? I got to get the family out, and we got everybody lined up out here, 1,000 officers lined up, waiting for present arms. And I'm trying to get the family out because Granny had to go to the bathroom, as we're all coming out, so she had to stop, and we had to hold up things. And I used to have to do it, and it's such a relief for me.
Yeah, and the professionalism went up. So I remember when I was in SWAT, we did a funeral out at the National Cemetery. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to remember I'm not going to name the sergeant because I can't know for sure who it was. But he was in charge of the firing team. That's your job. You do it. And I think I was up on the casket, and I'm looking out, and they're calling for the firing team. Well, every time he had to do a new command, he looked down at his hand. So he obviously had the commands written on his hand. So the first command came out, he looked down at his hand. Second command comes out, he looks down at his hand and says, oh, my God, this is awful.
And everybody else sees that, too.
Everybody sees that. I mean, that's just, it's like, oh, my. We got to do better. And then, like I said, the flag that was folded backwards, the funeral that I talked about, that the flags were backwards, they presented him with a flag that looked like it was hemorrhaging because the whole honor guard of
candy striped.
So the whole idea of folding the flag is nothing red should be showing.
Had to go behind the hearse, unfold it, refold it, bring it back to after you'd already given it to the family.
Yes.
Then you had to refold it and bring it back to them.
Yeah. I don't think they have to do that anymore. Yeah. That's one of the problems with the flag. So you practice with a flag. It gets broken in. So it's stretched, it's folded, it's easy to fold. The one on the casket's brand new. And they're all different.
And it's been to the cleaners to be pressed.
It's been to the cleaners to be pressed. So when you start folding the flag, they don't always come out exactly, and you have to. That's where that practice comes in to where, okay, I need to make this fold here and this fold here in order to get it to end up correctly, because you only got one shot in front of the family.
Usually,
yeah.
I want to get in now we're going to get back to the flag and the significance and the training for that, but I want to talk about the ceremony and the precision of the pallbearer.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons we got that casket, because before, and I think maybe when you were there, they just got officers, their friends or family, and it's still an option. I believe you give that option to the family, that you can have the honor guard be the pallbearers, or if you have specific people you want to do, they can do it.
How often does that fluctuate as far as people volunteering to the honor guard their duty? Typically,
the families have the friends do it, and whether they're cops or not cops or whatnot. But every now and again, and it never happened much when I was running it, where we actually had to be the pallbearers. But we practiced enough because they still have the casket. It's in not great shape anymore, but they still had the casket, and we would practice it because it's hard to walk with the casket. It's hard to make it look right, and when you're not a friend of the fallen, then you do want to make it look like it's in step. Now, if you're a friend of the fallen and the guys are struggling, that's fine. I mean, it's just like any other funeral. It's an honor for the friends or family to do the pallbearing. So whatever the family wanted.
I remember it is not easy to do. On one of the funerals from 7/7, we were asked to be pallbearers. I remember asking the other guys, I asked Pat Starr, I go, hey, do any of us know how to do this, march, and look good? Because there's going to be a lot of people looking at. We don't want to screw this up and dishonor that presentation. And it was hard. We actually remember, Chief, we went up to the funeral home and we got a casket, and Pat and I brought, it was about 300 pounds of weights, of 45s from the substation. He brought them South Central. I brought South Central. He brought Southeast, and we practiced marching out in the July heat, and it was we did not look good. And you remember watching
I was
us.
watching y'all. I was telling you what to do. I remember.
It was not easy, and I can't imagine going in cold.
But in that case, Joe, y'all were friends of the fallen.
Yes.
Right. So no one cares if y'all look good at that point. Because, for example,
we did, though.
I know y'all did. But, for example, you and Jason Jark, y'all are two different sizes,
Yeah.
right? So his holding something up is going to be different than you holding something up, right? But it's about the honor portion. And in that case, y'all were his friends, and y'all should have carried that casket, and y'all did fine. It all looked great, and y'all did a really good job.
I remember you talking about just little things like path. We went right by a tree. There was one of the roots was sticking up, and I was on the front left, and I almost tripped over that stump that was sticking up. And at the time, Chief Brown was standing out in my path, and he was saluting as I was coming in behind him. I had all the momentum of this very heavy casket, and Star, Jark, Mata, we're all pushing forward. I just screw it, and my left shoulder ran into him and got him out of the way. He realized that we were behind him and got out of the way. But yeah, there's so much because all eyes are on you, and just walking in unison, walking the steps, that is hard. And
it really is.
And honestly, the caskets we practice with, the handles, were different than the ones that was used.
Yep. Yeah, that'll happen all the time. We learned that you had to get the right gloves too, because they make the ones with the little rubber beads on it. And if you grab it with the smooth one, you're not holding on.
Yeah, we didn't wear gloves, but yeah, I can imagine what you're talking about because I've worn those gloves for the saluting ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult task, and I can't imagine with norms that y'all doing that lift like that.
It was fun.
There's pictures of it. I mean, they pressed them over their heads. It looked good. It did.
I'd do it today.
But I think
we'd have to have the right
under
people.
The same circumstances.
We'd have to have the right people.
You got it.
You know, you also kind of had to keep a sense of humor about yourself. Now, you might have to wait till you got back up to the foyer of the church to laugh, or whatever. But I remember in the tactical days when they were doing it, and they folded a flag, and when they go to tuck in the end of it, the guys had gloves on, and the guy comes out, and he's only got one glove on now because it's tucked up in the flag, and when he pulled his hand out, the glove stayed there. So he was somewhat embarrassed, but that didn't happen anymore when we went with the professional honor guard.
Yeah, that's when we learned that happens all the time, so you practice for that. And if you don't practice folding the flag with the gloves on, then you're kind of wasting your time.
Right.
But then your gloves turn red.
I won't say whose funeral it was, but I don't remember if you were there or not, but we pallbeared up at Wrestland, and when they put them on the truck at the gravesite, they forgot to put the brakes on the truck, right? So they let go of the casket, and the casket starts rolling, and I'm 30 feet away, and I'm about to break out into a full-fledged run, and one of the honor guard members saw what I had and just kind of stuck his hand down there to stop it. But can you imagine being at a funeral and this casket roll off the truck?
Bugle, the bagpipes.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the significance and
Mark Lang, gold,
outstanding.
Yeah, that he brought a level of professionalism to the honor guard. You call him anytime, any place, anywhere. He showed up and did taps, and just like everybody, he took it personal to be there to do a great job. He would show up early before all the family and practice to see where the best place to stand for the sound. And just great. He did that. Then we'd get some other buglers, like sometimes we did echo taps. And
Lucky Smith.
Well,
yeah, she would do those, the echo taps at the memorial and at the funeral. Mm-hmm. And they would also do other departments' funerals who weren't lucky enough. Not everybody's got a bugler.
And
Well,
And
Mark got asked by other agencies, I know, and,
Oh, yeah.
and for other military funerals as well.
Well, I mean, if you even look at the Chris Kyle funeral, right?
That's him.
That's it. That's him in Texas Stadium.
American Sniper.
That's American Sniper. That's real footage of Mark playing the taps for it, and that's got nothing to do with DPD.
And the other part of that is the bagpipes. That We
Yes.
brought that into. And what was
Don Casey.
Don Casey.
Don Casey played probably as many as Mark did.
Yeah.
He's still doing it.
Still doing
Yeah,
it?
he
Still
still
doing
does it.
Can you talk about the history and significance of both of those, where it came from?
I really don't know where the history of bagpipes came from and why they're a thing. I just know the most significant ones, they play taps or Amazing Grace and wander off. And so Amazing Grace just kind of fades off into the distance, and it's just they're in a dry
the
in the house.
bagpipes, I'm pretty sure, I'm not a historian, but I think they came over with the Irish.
Yeah.
And there were so many Irishmen that were New York City police and fire that they started that. And they have huge bagpipe bands up there.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen them at the police memorial,
yeah.
there's probably 50 of them, and there's 3 different bands.
Yeah, that's a
that are there.
whole different game. I was talking to Jack Means about that, and before the honor guard, he went to the police memorial to honor John Chase. He was there to call his name, and he looked around, and him and 3 other officers were the only representatives from the Dallas Police Department, and they were in plain uniforms, just there. That we did not send an honor guard presence. We didn't have people there representing the department in an official capacity. And he looks around, you look at New York City, and they got a whole band and choirs. And honor guards are just 20, 30 members there. And, of course, D.C. isn't that far from
The
New York.
Emerald Society is what they're called.
The Emerald
Yeah.
Society. So they had that representation. He says he came back at the time and told Rathburn, he says, this was embarrassing. He says, here we are, one of the largest police departments, and we don't have an honor guard at the National Memorial. And that played a part into when part of the problem with that was our police Memorial Day was always done in conjunction with the city council meeting. And that was one of my early battles. I says, why do we have to have the council meeting or the police memorial always on a Tuesday when it can interfere with going to the National Police Memorial, because sometimes they fall on the same day? He says, well, that way the council doesn't have to take a special day to come down. I says, I really think they should take a special day and come down, because other departments will set up their Memorial Day on the 1st of May or the 5th of May or something like that so that they can attend the National Memorial. Where in Dallas, we were augured in on that one day, whatever the city council meeting, so they could just walk out of their building at noon for lunch and come down and honor our officers.
And sleep during the memorial.
And sleep during the memorial. And then have to call their names and honor them. And I fought that battle too. I says, why do we care about the city councilmen there? I says, well, they have to be recognized. Why? We're honoring our fallen, our people that gave their lives for this city. And you say I have to call a councilman's names because he wants a vote? No. They'll have their picture in the paper. They'll have the news coverage. We'll show them there. But that fell on deaf ears. There wasn't a chief around that was going to circumvent that.
I want to get into back to the ceremony of the flag folding.
Mm-hmm.
And we've kind of talked about some snafus of that process. What kind of training did y'all do and to avoid the folding it backwards and kind of explain? I was not aware of how you fold and absolutely no red showing. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that dates back to red is blood. So that shows it's kind of you're honoring the family, and showing all blue is that. And if it's done perfect, there's 1 star at the top corner. Very rarely does it come out perfect. You can get it close, but very rarely it comes out. The problem is every flag is cotton, and every flag is different. So when we would do the practice, we would sometimes, before you would put the actual flag on the casket, so that was part of the honor guards. We knew this would happen. So Reed would show up with the thing that was in the thing from the dry cleaner and all the stuff taken to that, says, let's have the flag first. And we would go in the back room before he put it on the casket and would practice folding with that actual flag so we would know. And part of preventing that is just like a professional. When you do it over and over and over and over, you don't fold it backwards because it's almost in your sleep. Well, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. But folding the flag, there's 20 different ways. You can do it fast, you can do it slow, you can do it deliberate, and all those were if you watch flag foldings, you'll see some that snap it. You'll see some that are deliberate and fold it over slowly. There's no wrong way to do it as long as you fold it when it ends up with right. And that's just because that when they go home and put it in a case, display case, you want that thing to be perfect because it'll be read forever.
And I know y'all don't know anything about low bid, but the flags sometimes weren't the same size.
Or the same company.
I
They
would
were never
order
the
them.
same
I would
size.
order them 50 at a time, and they'd come in, and I'd take a couple of them and take one and lay it out on the table, and I'd take another one, lay it on the table, and it was an inch less wide, or an inch wider, or an inch longer, or whatever. And it also in the general orders it calls for. An officer who passed away, the family has the option of American flag or a Texas flag.
That's right.
And I did keep like 3 Texas flags, and I only used one of them in
The motor jock.
11 years. Doughboy.
Yeah, Doughboy.
Yeah, Bill Daughtry.
I
And
remember
you ought to have seen the guys trying to figure out how you fold that thing because you got different colors in different squares.
Yeah,
and
there
only
there
one
is an official
star.
way to fold that.
There is, but don't know if we ever found that out or not.
Yeah, we did.
What it was.
Yeah, we did the research and found out how you officially. Can't remember it today,
Yeah.
but I know at the time we got the Texas flag and we folded it the way it was supposed to be folded.
And who usually would hand over the
So-
flag?
At any funeral, usually the highest ranking member. So whoever was the highest ranking, and I did it several times, and that is super emotional because you're thanking them for their service, whether it's a retiree, never on a line of duty death. It's usually the actual chief of police that presents it.
There's a story behind that. When I first took the job, that's what it was. I would look around and watch people as they come in, and if a lieutenant came in or a captain came in and then a chief came in, I would try to catch them, and I said, would you mind presenting the flag? You seem to be the senior person here. About 50% of the time they'd say, no, I don't want any part of going up there in front of that family and doing that. There was one particular funeral after the great shakeup under Chief Bolton, and we were at Restland or somewhere, and when the service was over, we were walking down to the cemetery, and I'm looking. I said, who can I get to do that? Well, there's 2 sergeants over there, but one's not in uniform. Well, there's a lieutenant who was formerly a chief. So I asked if they would give the flag. And they did, and it went very well, and there was no problems. And I got in my car, and I said, that's one more. Fooled them again. That was our saying. And when I got back to the office, my lieutenant and sergeant were going around in little tight circles. And they said, Chief's office wants to see you right now. And I was told, don't ever give that flag to anybody else like that, because this person was not held in high regard. So after that, Chief Bolton said, we got enough chiefs here that may not be busy that day. If you'll set up a schedule, there will be a chief at retirees' funerals.
Still today, same.
And
they got a schedule for it.
That went over big with Chief. I made a lot of friends there when I would call them and say, hey, this is your week on the calendar. We got a retiree's funeral tomorrow.
Yeah, Chief Bolton was an outstanding supporter until it got kicked down, but for whatever reason. But I remember I was at Brian
Jackson?
No, it was a current officer, Brian Thomas. I was at his funeral, and it was out in Rockwall at the funeral out there. And Chief Bolton came out, and I mean, he was probably one of the better ones at presenting the flag, more heartfelt, genuine than any chief I've ever seen present the flag. So we get done, and I'm thanking him for what a great job he did. And, of course, I hit him up about the honor guard. That was before I'd done any research. He says, yeah, write it up. and show me. And that's probably where that was after Chief Wyndham's funeral and before I even did any presentation. But he was a great supporter and was probably pivotal in us getting started. But yeah, at funerals was just so heartfelt and understanding. He did
always remove his hat when he knelt down and gave the flag.
Kind of like he intuitively knew what to do.
Yeah, and I have a story about him while we're on that subject. Every funeral, a line of duty funeral, that happened under his administration, every night from the time of death through the funeral, every evening about 9 or 9:30, my cell phone would ring and it would be him. How's it going? Family doing okay? Do you need anything, or is anyone not cooperating? And you'll understand the not cooperating part. And I never said anything about anybody not cooperating. I could have, but I knew it would have been fixed by the next morning.
Yeah.
If I had said, so-and-so's doesn't want to do this, and we think they ought to do this. But, yeah, with good support.
Yes. You said you talk about how emotional it is to hand over that flag. Joe, you've done it several times?
Yes.
Can you describe that feeling?
There's a level of honor. So you understand that you're representing it's not me. I'm just a representative of the Dallas Police Department. And the person that has served this city, risked their lives, and their loved ones sitting there, and you just want to convey to them how much their sacrifice was appreciated. And to be honest, the words just come to you. You kneel down in front of them, you take your hat off, and the words just come of how much you appreciate their sacrifice to the city. And
you didn't have to know them.
No.
Most of the time you didn't.
No, most of the time it was wives and stuff like that. Yeah. You never met them before in your life, but you could feel you just made eye contact with them and said the words of how much you respected what they did and honored their service, and handed them the flag. And there's never a dry eye. I don't think I've ever handed a flag to someone who wasn't crying.
The children.
Oh yeah, that's the hardest part. So, Police Memorial Day, I did several of them, and you'd watch the children grow. You'd go year to year, and that was the hardest part. You'd look and you say, that kid grew up without a dad. Because I think 5 or 6 years I called the roll call of honor. And you'd look up and you'd try to find the family member of the person you just called, and you just see him grow. It was just, that was the heartbreaking part of realizing these people lost their loved one forever.
And we would cheat a little bit. I would. They never took it out of my pay or anything, but if we had like a separated family, which unfortunately in our line of work there are separated families, and but we would give 2, sometimes 3 flags. Not only was the one on the casket went to the wife, or they could designate the mother or the father. You couldn't go without giving that kid something.
Yeah.
And Chief Bolton started that, where we would hold on to their hat with their hat badge and give it to a child. Or I remember one time deep in recesses of my mind, he wanted something he could give to them, and we found the person that made the little badge necklace. They used to be over on Canton or somewhere, and we bought a whole bunch of those, and I would slip him one to give to one kid. And it didn't go over big for the boys, but they had something.
Yeah.
Another ceremony that everybody has seen, from military to first responder funerals, is the firing party. Can you talk about the significance of that and that process?
The whole history of the 21 gun salute, that's been going on for a long time. And it looks, when it's done right, I says, well, that's pretty easy. You try to get 7 people to fire the trigger at the same time. And so in our initial funerals, I think you've seen everything read from pistols to shotguns to mostly just pistols and shotguns. Mm-hmm. And it just, especially pistols, it just looks silly. So they'd hold their pistols up and they'd all be at different angles and you'd hear the pop, but it was It was silly. And then they went to shotguns, and that was louder and had a nice impact. But from Arlington, we learned that you could get M1 Garands for free. There was a armory in Ohio that you had to requisition, and they had to be used. They had to be used for honor guard purposes. But we did that requisition. But I think, was it Norm's funeral came up before we had them, and Arlington loaned us their M1 Garands so that we learned with them. And what you find quickly with the M1 Garands is they're somewhat dependable. So you've got blank ammo, and the blank ammo doesn't cycle the breech. If you take the arrestor off, it will sometimes, it won't, but you got to count on being able to cycle the engine. So part of the
holler bang when it didn't go off.
Yeah. Well, actually, it worked out a little better when some of them didn't misfire because they weren't out of sync. It was you couldn't
tell the difference between a 20 or a 21 gun salute if someone didn't fire.
Yeah.
But you could definitely tell if someone's off timing.
Yep.
Because you'll hear one bang and then you'll hear a bang 2 seconds later.
It sounds like an echo,
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah, and when it goes off right, it goes right. But that was, like you talked about, putting people in positions where they're comfortable. So you would get a team together that was used to working together that would get the motions down exactly the same and do it over and over and over and get that rhythm down so that when it came time, game on, that they were as close to perfect as they could.
Was it just like a mental count?
You went off a count, but it's ready, aim, fire. So the cadence of who was calling the commands played a big role in everybody on the team getting used to that. So you throw somebody new in there that does the cadence difference, it's going to throw everybody off. That's why it was important to have a firing team that did that all the time. And we had probably 8 or 10 that we held on to, that 7 would be chosen among that group. But we kept that. There's people that you always put on the firing team because you knew they were going to be able to handle it. And that's something that really shows up big when it's not done right, because you'll hear that echo.
That's the hardest task the honor guard does, to make it look right. And when we would have the funerals, so let's say you designate 10 people to do it, or 8, and they would practice all morning, and someone's having a bad day, they're just not feeling it, whatever the case may be, and you're like, well, you're out today, I'm sorry, but you haven't practiced anything else, so they have to be on the sidelines and watch what's going on. And it's not an insult, because usually it's our best that's on the firing team. Right? I mean, you put your best up there, and they got to practice, and then maybe they're just having an off day, or they just can't get their timing right, or whatever. I mean, I've seen some of our best just like, all right, you're not shooting today, buddy.
Just a bad day.
Yeah, and it kind of hurts their heart a little bit, but they understand it. I mean, it looks perfect if it goes off right, and it looks silly if you're an honor guard person if it doesn't go off right. And I'd say 9 out of 10 times it went off good.
You said it's probably the hardest thing. It is one of the hardest things, but Joe can probably tell you that coordinating with the helicopter to fly over at the correct time, that is a challenge.
Not anymore. We got that figured out.
Do you?
And we do. And it just depends on who's flying that helicopter.
And it depends on who's playing taps and
Yeah,
what notes you start them on.
We would practice that too. So we would have them play taps and do the flyover to get that coordination in place. So they knew they would position themselves at a place they knew when I would get on the radio, taps had started, and then they'd start their approach, and you could hear them about 2/3 of the way into the song. You'd start to hear the helicopter, and you knew you did it right.
But see, that was another honor guard thing. They would handle that. I didn't have to worry about having a radio that would work. You want the helicopter far enough away. You want them up in the air, but far enough away that they're not hovering with the news helicopters. And our helicopter people are excellent at telling the news helicopters to get out of the way.
Well, I tell you, I won't say which funeral it was, but we're up in North Dallas, and that we've practiced it. And Air One, the weather moves in, and Air One can't do the flyover now. Mm-hmm. But the news helicopter's flying right above us. And I look over at our PIO, and I was like, "Can you get us in contact with that news helicopter?" And she's like, "Well, yeah, I think so." And the news helicopter did the flyover. Only one person on the department noticed, because he came up to me afterwards like, "You're gonna have to tell me later how you pulled that one off."
Yeah, why is WFAA flying here?
But they would cooperate, and we had some funerals where there would be 4 helicopters in a V formation, one of ours and the news people.
Yeah, they do the one would fly away. Yeah, where they do a formation
missing
and
man
missing man formation.
All right, I want to move along to 2013, Joe. You're wrapping up a long career,
Yes.
and also you're about to hand over the baton, the honor guard, to somebody else. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was it was a long. I knew I was going to be retiring. I was coming up on 59. I thought that was a nice time to retire, and Jeremy had been active in the honor guard, and several people had shown interest in wanting to take it over. Well, this was kind of giving away my child. And when that came to, I wanted someone who I thought had a vision that would carry on in the same manner. Not exactly. I mean, I made my share of mistakes all along the road, but I wanted somebody that had the intelligence and the caring that would take this whole thing and keep it going forward and not turn it into something it shouldn't be. I wanted it to stay focused on the families. My whole vision with the honor guard is when we do a service, they know we were there, but that's all. We're not the center of attention. We're not there to say, hey, we're the honor guard. This is us. This is what we're doing. We're there to bring a sense of normalcy to life. So when we do a retiree's funeral, you're not there to show anything off. You're to show the family that life goes on, that we're here. Watch this. We put one foot in front of the other. We stand here. We honor you, and we're gone. No more exciting than that. Whether it's an online duty or line of duty death or retirees, I wanted the honor guard to say, "Oh yeah, they were there. Boy, they did that good." But not, did you see the honor guard? That wasn't important. Same thing with when the Kennedy Memorial. I had the honor of setting up the thing, and I didn't want the honor guard to be any part of it. So we kept it really simple, and someone showed up later and complicated it and made it just more difficult than it should have been, trying to put focus on the honor guard. I want the honor guard just to show up, do what they're supposed to do, and get out. You don't notice they're there. And Jeremy kind of had that same attitude. I mean, we had a lot of conversations. You were still a senior corporal at that time. You just gotten sergeant.
I was sergeant.
Just gotten sergeant. So to say I begged him would be an understatement. I just, because I knew that he would do a good job after I left, and I was proven right. So I like to be right once in a while. I'm not right all that often, but when I decided, I was actually given the opportunity to recommend him, so that it wasn't taken out of my hands. And I kind of honor the people that were supervising at the time that let me have enough input into it that I was allowed to say, no, I think Jeremy would be better in this position than some other choices we could have had.
And that is rare in this department, that you always get kind of your say really matters.
Yeah. And that happened after all the stuff that happened. The honor guard, there wasn't a single thing that I got turned down on. If they'd have just ignored me, it would have been exactly the same. But when I got approval for all the stuff, the uniforms, the travel, the stuff we were doing to try to get us more involved in more efficiency, they never batted an eye. Now, granted, I wanted to train more. Being in SWAT, training is a big deal. But I think the quarterly training worked out really well, and that was pretty much a standard across the entire nation. When I talked to honor guards, well, how often do you train? It says, well, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year. So that worked out to, I think we may have done it 3 times a year. So we'd set it up and then like that. But Jeremy was there to take it over, and I was glad.
Chief, walk us through this.
All right. Well, I was, in my mind, I was kind of getting done with it. I was not, I'd promoted up a little bit, and I was still one of the ground troops in the honor guard. And so, you still had to do what your squad leader said and everything. And I didn't necessarily always agree with how we were running things. But with that said, I mean, I wasn't there. It wasn't about me. It was about the families. And then we're at the United Methodist Church, I think, Joe, is where you set up all that stuff.
Yeah, up there in North Dallas.
And Joe says he's thinking about stepping down. And the guy that everybody thought was going to probably take it over, at least amongst the troops, me and him didn't really see eye to eye. He's a good guy. Me and him got 2 different ways of doing things. And I thought, well, if he takes it over, I'm out. I'll be out immediately. And then I'm sitting there thinking, because Joe's talking, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. And I thought, well, crap. If I'm going to sit here and complain about it, I got a chance to do it myself. So I was like, I'll raise my hand and put it out there like that. And then, behind the scenes, I guess they got it worked out so I could take it over. And we went from there.
So you were a brand new sergeant.
I've been a sergeant about a year and a half, 2 years, so still pretty new.
As far as you wanting to take it over, why did you want to? I mean, just you knew it was a good thing. It was an efficient. It was precision based. Did you want to continue that, or did you have your own ideas?
I had both, right? So for like Denomy's perspective, he's in charge of things, so he's not doing what the ground troops are doing, right? So there was things that would happen that probably never got back to his ears, right? So like let's say it was a colors event, right? And he might have told somebody a month out. I might not know about it until the day before. And that would just drive me bonkers when you're trying to figure out your schedule in your life and you're getting a phone call the night before saying, we got to be here, we got to be there. And it's like, can we plan this a little bit better? Right. And, I mean, he might have told somebody a month in advance and we just didn't know about it. So I thought things like that, I thought we can clean that up, right? Because it could hurt the morale of the ground troops, right? And then, but he had laid the foundation. We did the police memorial every year, right? We knew our roles at a funeral or a retiree. And you're like, well, there's things we can work on. There's always improvements to be made. But he had laid a great foundation. So then it was just like, okay, let's just build upon that, you know.
Just refine it.
Yeah, and put my tweaks on it, right? I pay attention to a lot of the details, and I probably get off in the weeds, especially now, way too much more than I should. But it's like, well, let's get off in the weeds on some of this stuff and see if we can't make it better for the troops below them that they want to do this, right? Make it more, so you know, because we had some people starting to leave around that time. At that point, we'd only lost 1 or 2 people. And then I think at this point, people were starting to get kind of a little burned out of it and all that. And so it was like, well, let's see if we can't do things a little different. But for the most part, I mean, the foundation was the same. We did the same things. I mean, you can look at the police memorial speech. It's been tweaked over the years, but it's still the same one Joe Denomy probably wrote in 01, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's been tweaked a little bit just to modernize, but for the most part, we still do a lot of the same stuff.
You mentioned the retiree funerals. Can you talk about that and significance and what that means to you? Because I've heard Lance Crawford, actually, I was talking to him before this episode, and he said that, you know, being a part of the Honor Guard was his most memorable thing because you actually felt wanted.
So retiree funerals are probably the most unattended events by officers, right? Because when somebody retires, they start losing contact with their acquaintances, and they keep in contact with their good friends, but they don't keep in contact with their, you know, the people you just kind of knew in passing or that you weren't super close with. Well, you go to a retiree funeral, especially if they've been gone for any length of time, sometimes it'd only be 4 or 5 family members there, depending on the life. But here we were, and that family, you know, that was probably one of my, favorite things. It was always sad, but it was one of my most rewarding parts of the Honor Guard was to go to a retiree funeral. And I remember one in particular, we went out to Rockwall, and this guy was in his 80s, and he got buried in his uniform. He's a retiree now. I mean, it's not necessarily the policy. We kind of made it happen for him. But you're like, who is 80-something years old and still thinks they're a cop? This guy. I guarantee you, I mean, Joe's been gone for a while, but I bet he still tells cop stories because he's still a cop, right? We're all going to do it when we retire. Everybody don't do that. You know, if you work in a warehouse or whatever, you might have some stories, but that's not what defines you. So retirees, not all of them, but, you know, it's not their whole life. But, I mean, you're a cop. I don't care. I guarantee you, Joe and Reed both, to this day, when they go eat in a restaurant, they're eyeballing everybody walking in the door. Right, they're still trying to see who's the bad guys, who's the good guys. Even though they're growing, I'm old, or retiree, I ain't doing nothing. They're still looking. And I guarantee you, if they're in a restaurant and a cop has to go do something, needs help, both of them are going to go dogpile the guy and help him out, because that's just what cops do. So the retiree stuff was really cool, and in that sense, and it's rewarding because it's not a lot of publicity about it. I mean, because people get it, you know, they get older and they pass. That's part of life. So it's not, we might put a notice out on the funeral, but unless they just left last year, it's usually just a notice on the computer, and people that want to attend. But the Honor Guard would go. Once we were told, it was every time, anytime. It's like, if we could get there in a day, we're going.
Why did that one in Rockwall strike you?
Just because he was in his uniform, right? You know, you go to most funerals, people are buried in their suits, right? And you're like, this guy's still a police officer in his mind. Right, this was his final wish. He told his family, "This is what I want to happen." Maybe he had the uniform still in his closet. You know, he never turned it in, or whatever the case may be. But you're like, "This is the guy," you know. And that's cool. And yeah, you're looking at him. He's a little old guy. He doesn't look like a cop anymore. But I guarantee you, in his mind, he was a cop. And I'm like, that's going to be me. That's going to be all these people that I know. That in our mind, we're still police officers, even though we might have been done and all we've done is tell war stories for the last 30 years. We're still police, and that's one thing unique about this profession. I mean, other professions are very similar. Military, fire, that kind of thing. But this is one of the few jobs where even when you leave here, you're never really done, at least in your mind. So that's what struck me about it. It's like, okay, this is different. Or maybe it just struck it over me personally. I don't know.
And that was in 2014. You took the keys, and what kind of, you had any challenges whenever you said there was some turnover about getting people leaving? You're having to recruit more. How'd that go?
Well, one of the most beneficial things for me in my career was taking over the honor guard, because it taught me what the bureaucracy of the department was, what approval levels things needed to go through, and how purchasing. Right? Purchasing on the police department, you think would be simple. It is not. It's extremely complicated. And when Joe and them took over, they got all of us coats, right? Which is great. But for example, Vanessa Berry was one of the first members of the honor guard. She's a tiny little thing, right? So when she left the honor guard, anytime a tiny little officer would come in, right? Here's Vanessa's coat. Here's Vanessa's coat. Here's Vanessa's coat. I mean, probably 3 different ladies had to wear Vanessa's coat over the years, right? It's like, let's get some new uniforms. I say new uniforms. Let's get the same uniform, but just let's get it for these officers, right? So I don't quite know what they had down, but at one point I had 30 extra coats sitting up there, right? So unless you just came in and were abnormally tall or something, we probably had something that would fit you until we could get you properly outfitted. So that was a challenge, and that's still a problem to this day, really. But the bureaucracy, it taught me the bureaucracy of the department and how to get things done. Now, I'm a stubborn fella, so if you told me no...
You are.
Yeah. So if you told me no or rejected something or said it did wrong, well, that was fine. I was just going to redo it and do it again until I got it right. Because eventually you're going to say yes, especially when it comes to the honor guard. No one's going to tell you, no, we're not going to buy shoes for the honor guard members. Like, you want them to wear patent leather or you want them to wear cowboy boots? I mean, something's going to happen here, But scheduling was a thing. Now, what I screwed up on is I took too much on to myself. And I think me and Kent might have been working together when we're running the honor guard and trying to balance my job, my personal life, and the honor guard, right? Well, I mean, I say we're working together. Kent was there. He wasn't really doing much.
I handled all your work. You're right.
Yeah. But I had too much on my plate. And then once I had it on my plate, I wouldn't give it to nobody. And that's what started my spiral of burnout in the honor guard, is that I had too much on my plate, and I wouldn't, because if I gave it to you, you would do it differently than me, and then that was that's my own personal flaw. I don't, I like it done my way.
Yeah, everybody knows the Foy way of doing things, but Joe, whenever you had it, I'm sure you felt the same way, as far as you built something and you didn't want it fall apart.
That's part of being in that leadership role is you make decisions, good, bad, or indifferent. Some are right, some are wrong.
You're not going to make everybody happy.
You're not going to make everybody happy. In fact, my mom always said, you don't like everybody, don't expect everybody to like you. And so you have that mentality that says, I know this is right. There were certain things that I did, I know I wanted it done this way, and I'm sure Foy's the same way. We'll compromise on some things, but other things you just got to have it this way. And I was fortunate in my time that it was new and they didn't know any different. So people that don't know back away when you show a little bit of confidence and say, this is the way it's done. It's just say it louder, and they say, oh, you must be right because you're saying it loud.
At least sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, you go to anything. Reed Higgins at a funeral is the most powerful man on the police department back then, because he could go up to any chief and say, this is what we're doing, and the chief is going to go, okay, right? When I was running the honor guard, chief, I need you to stand here. I need you to do this. I don't care what chief it was. I don't care what rank they were. Every last time they want direction at that point. Tell us what you want us to do, because if they're there for a reason, and they'll do what you ask them to do, right? And I mean, he talked about it earlier, but I've trained numerous chiefs on this police department who are going to have to present a flag, and they're nervous, right? And they want to do it right. So you'll set up a chair somewhere in an office somewhere and say, okay, I'm the widow. This is what you do. and we'll go through it for 30 minutes to an hour, right? And now you only have to do it once, and then they kind of get a feel for it, and you never have to hear about it again. You give them a little something to say, and you kind of say this, add whatever you want to it. But the one, I mean, that when it comes to funerals or any type of funeral, anyone that wants to be involved, I don't care what your rank is, you want to do it right. You don't want to be, you don't want to insult no one.
Yeah, you don't want to dishonor them and be that guy.
That was what I liked about working with Jeremy and Joe best. We all, when we were in the academy, had a guy that it'd be Friday afternoon in your class, and the instructor would say, well, that's it for today. Today's Friday. We'll see y'all on Monday. And he's the what if guy. He raises his hand and said, well, what if? And you just wanted to strangle him, you know. But these guys were both what if. I mean, just little things. You got a great uncle in a line of duty death, and he's in a wheelchair, and suddenly half your center row is blocked. Yet they had to change on the fly. And Gene Hagen's words of be flexible never were more important than that.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of punts.
Yeah.
You get there and you'd have it all set up. You'd know exactly what you're doing, and all of a sudden a fly down in the ointment, you say, uh-oh.
What is an operation?
Yeah.
It like Joe, you all these 20 years in SWAT, it's the precision and prep that you had to do. It's an operation.
Yeah, it's no different than warfare. You plan for certain things, and then life happens.
Well, there's a plant.
Yeah.
There's a podium. Anything. If you don't get there early enough to move things or plan it, you're adjusting. And it sounds silly that a plant is in your way, right? We're police officers. It's a plant. Go move it.
And well-meaning people will move things after the fact.
And you're like, oh, we got to figure this out. So you have to go early. You have to practice. We practiced at North Dallas Church on funerals multiple times. But that church, we never had a funeral there. So if we went to Watermark or Prestonwood or anything like that, the environment's a little different. The concept's the same. We're going to do the same thing, but now instead of going, you can't just say we're going to take 20 steps this way. You can't, because the situation is different every time.
What are some of the major changes you did in your time of taking that over?
Initially, I screwed up at first. I was just sending our squad leaders the events, right? And depending on the squad leader to tell his people or her people to get these scheduled. Well, everybody's human, and we missed an event. It wasn't a funeral; it was a colors thing, but we still missed an event, and it didn't make us look good. It was the sergeant had put it in his calendar for the next day. I mean, it happens. So I started sending, when I would send the notice out, I would send it to the whole squad, just the whole squad, because I figured between 10 guys, right, somebody's going to go, Sarge, you screwed up. We got to be here today, right? And then once that happened, I think the events started going, I say easier. Everybody was notified, right? But then you found out if you were on call the first week of the month, because that's how we did it, everybody got a week, right? There were certain events you were always going to do, right? Because a holiday follows on that first week of the month every year. So then we had to rotate it a little bit, because if you had the last week of the month, you were going to do something on Memorial Day every year. So if you had the same squad at the last week of for the year, then they were going to do Memorial Day. They never get a Memorial Day off because there's going to be some event somewhere. So you just kind of rotate stuff like that, and then we boosted it up to 40 officers because since it was volunteer, and I figured out real soon that no one was telling me no on anything, right? And Lieutenant Matt Williamson was in charge of it, and me and him had a kind of conversation. I'm like, I don't want you to do anything. Just sign everything I give you and go make an argument if you need to. And he's like, sounds good to me. And,
that's Matt.
Yeah. And, I mean, he was great for it. And we got along real well. But I was like, well, we can just get as many people as you want. So I boosted it up to 40 people almost immediately. Right. Now, I will say this. Joe, they had done tryouts and height and weight standards. Realized real quick, if we wanted to keep a volunteer honor guard, we were going to have to kind of let that go a little bit because we didn't have enough volunteers. And at some point, you're going to burn all the guys out if they've been over there, right? I mean, I think I think there's one person left from the initial beginning.
That A-Rod?
No, you're right. No? He quit a couple years ago.
Okay.
Jabari Howard.
Okay.
I think he's the last one standing from the initial, because it's an emotional toll. It's a time commitment. In funerals, and I'll say this is one of the stupidest things I ever had to deal with in the honor guard, right? No one ever said no. right? So let's say you were one of my honor guard members and you went to your sergeant and said, hey, I got to go do a retiree funeral and it's tomorrow, right? No one ever gave too much pushback. But I had this one other sergeant. He gives me a call and he goes, hey, this officer keeps having to go to these funerals. I'm like, yeah, it's this week. He's on call. That's his deal. Yeah, can you give me a little more notice on this? I'm like, how much notice do you want? I don't know, like a week? And I pursued to lose my temper. I'm like, are you kidding me, right? Can everybody tell me when they're going to pass away so we can just let you know when we're going to need your officer? And he's like, he realized when he was talking that he was
full of shit.
Yeah, being pretty much stupid.
But that didn't stop you from dressing him down further, did it?
Well, of course not. That's not who I am. But I mean, you're like, how dumb can you be? Where nobody plans their funeral, and the honor guard is going to be called, but they're not the first thing the family's thinking of. It's not even the first thing the funeral coordinator's thinking of, right? The first thing that is what does this family need? And then when you start planning the funeral, now you start. It might take a couple days to figure out we're going to do it, and in some families will wait a week, and some families are like, let's get this done in 3 days.
Some will want to do it on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, and it's like we can't control that, and so whatever they want, we do.
Challenging times for the profession, and especially for this department. We're going to talk about July 7th, 2016. I was working for you,
right?
And I think you and I had on July 6th, you and I had a interesting conversation. You were mad at me because I stumbled into a drug house. You probably don't remember this, up in the 10s, and was not too happy with each other. So then July 7th happened, and you're over the honor guard. Can you walk us through that timeline?
So I wasn't over the honor guard. I had quit the honor.
That's right.
I had quit the honor guard police memorial of 2016, and I say quit,
which is in May.
So I'd quit for a couple months. I'd stepped down. I'd burnt myself out, and I'd gave the reins to a couple other people, right? And by the way, I can't remember all the times I was mad at you. So you're right. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I remember.
But then July 7th happened. And, well, I had the most experience running the honor guard at the time. And the guy that was running it, rightfully so, was overwhelmed. Like Reed got called in for it. And Reed, you're already retired, I believe, right? This was a national event. And this was, other than 9/11, I still, maybe even to this day, I don't think we've ever lost 4 officers at one time, or 5 officers at one time anywhere. Right?
They lost 4 in Oakland. We went to that funeral.
Right.
But that's the only other one.
Well, this was 5 officers and 4 DPD, 1 DART, right? And this was going to be an event, and
global attention.
And I'm talking to I called the guy that was in charge of it, and I'm like, if you need me to help, I'm here. I'll help you with whatever you need. And that was on, I think, Thursday. Sunday, he calls me and he goes, man, I am completely overwhelmed. This is going to be his first event. Right. And I'm like, okay. And he was struggling with just the logistics, just because it's so much you're thinking about at one time. And I was like, all right, I tell you what, take the rest of the night off. I was like, they're not going to do anything. I've got it. Tell them to call me. We're not going to do anything for a few days. Right. I mean, no one is looking, they're talking about funerals, but that's not the thing. And I sat down and I started writing up scripts and plans because I didn't know where anything was going to be. I didn't know what anybody wanted. And then you just waited. You were waiting like, okay, when Reed or Tina Duncan or whoever calls me and tells me on this date we're doing this. Yes, ma'am. That's the answer we're going to give her. But I've already got kind of an idea. And that's how it began. And that was the week of hell. I mean, work-wise. I'm not talking about the emotional toil. Just the work-wise. Work was intense. Because you're going to meetings and you're like, I don't need to be in this meeting. This has nothing to do with the honor guard. But they're inviting you because you don't know if you need to be there or not, right? And then the events start getting planned. And once the events start getting planned, I put everybody in the honor guard on special assignment for that week. And, I mean, kind of with the directive, let someone give you crap about this. Just call me, right? And, of course, no one did. Everybody was very receptive to everything. And then it became every funeral had to stand on its own. It had to stand on its own. You couldn't do something well, this one's his family's coming from out of town. It won't be that big, so we're not going to do. No, you can't do that. This is a tragic event. So whatever we do for one, we got to do for all if that's what the family wants. So it was a lot of planning in the sense of, because we did it at 4 different places, I believe. I think we did
different places, different funeral homes,
Prestonwood, Fort Worth,
different burials,
some out
everything.
Of state. 13 events.
13 events.
5 days.
In 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
That also includes the wake.
We did visitations for everybody. So you might be doing a funeral during the day. You're going home for an hour, maybe grabbing a shower, and you're going to a visitation for another officer. By the end, everybody in Honor Guard stunk because there was no time to get their uniforms cleaned, right? And this is July, so everybody's outside for these funerals, right? And there's nothing they can do about it. I mean, we're literally spraying each other with Febreze every morning, right? It's like, what can you do? There's no dry cleaner that's going to get you there where you needed to be. And you might be in Fort Worth one day or for 3 hours, and then you got to turn around, and because everybody had a job that week, everybody. And I think I said it. I think I told you before. That was my most proud of the Honor Guard, right? Because normally there's a lot of infighting and bitching and griping, and why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? No, none of that week. None of it. Hey, I need you to stand here and hold that door open. Okay. And there was no questions. Nobody asked. Nobody gave any resistance. Okay, that's my job, and that's what they did. I mean, it was not DPD normal. How we normally complain about everything.
Nothing was normal.
No.
So, what kind of emotional drain did it have on you and the squad?
Well, we had some people quit after the Honor Guard, after 7/7, right? And I say after 7/7. They gave it time because the week after that, Baton Rouge happened, right? And then we sent officers to Baton Rouge. But no one quit because they couldn't handle it. They're like, okay, you took everything out of my sponge here. I don't have anything left, and I'm good. For me, the whole week was business, right? It was 7 a.m. to probably 10 o'clock every night, either on the phone, on my email, thinking about something, practicing something. My mind was constantly running. But the department was very understanding, right? I went to Zamarippa's funeral in Fort Worth, and I parked on the perimeter, right? Because I had to leave the funeral early to get to the cemetery, right? Well, when I parked my car, I left my keys to one of the officers up there, and I was like, hey, if you need to move it, but I got to be able to get out. So she moved it for me and then locked my keys in the car. So I'm looking, and I'm like, what do I do? And I make a decision, and I break the window out. And my wife was with me at the time, and she's like, can you do that? Well, we just did. Get in the car, honey. And we beat feet over to the National Cemetery, and we do everything there. And I wind up going to my chain at the time. I'm like, okay, I made a decision. And maybe it wasn't an emergency, but it seemed like an emergency to me. No pushback, no complaining. No, we get it. No problems. Don't worry about it. Go get it fixed. Right? So we got it fixed. The rules didn't apply that week, which was good because they didn't need to apply. No one's worried about calls and staffing and what's doing this or none of that. No, they understood the importance of it. Now, at the end, I went back to South Central that day, put everything up, and I'm like, I'm going home for the weekend. And we had an equipment room at South Central, and I went in there, and when I got in there, that's when the emotions just finally hit me. All right, I knew a couple of the officers, and all you can hear is Amazing Grace in your head, and then you think about what you just did. I mean, what you did for a week. And I sat there and I cried like a baby, probably for 5 minutes, right? Kent was nowhere to be found, so he wouldn't hold me. But, I sat there, and when I came out, I'm like, okay, all right, I hope we never have to ever see that movie again, I never want to do that again. And then, we've had other officers pass, but nothing on that scale.
No, nothing like that. And, knock on wood, that not in our lifetime. I mean, that was hard for everybody. How did you set aside personal grieving, but also running and maintaining the task?
Joe, I have no emotional side. You know that.
Yeah, you do.
Look, I think every cop is the same when it comes to this. When it's work time, it's work time. Every cop has been on some horrific scenes, right? And the majority of them are going to push through, and they're going to work because that's what they're doing. Now, they might deal with it differently. Later, there might be some problems later. I mean, you do wellness, there's going to be scars from it. But when it's work time, it's work time. So I was at work, and whether it was rightfully so or not, I felt like I had the funerals were on my back, right? And it wasn't, and I know that, but that's how I felt responsible, that we can't screw this up. And we screwed up something at every funeral, but it was so minute that unless you were in the honor guard or you knew what was supposed to happen, no one noticed. No one did, that I know about anyway. I mean, I was taking notes and like, okay, we're not going to, we did this on Tuesday, we're not going to do this on Wednesday. But people didn't notice, right? Or things would happen that unforeseen, or somebody missteps, somebody gets their glove caught in the flagpole, stuff like that, right? But we just learned and moved on. But, it was work time. And even the honor guard, because, there's 40 members there and everybody's there. They're not breaking down. They're holding it together. They're doing their job, right? And they know these officers that fell. There was nobody there that didn't know these officers. You knew somebody. You might not have known them well, but you knew at least one, so.
Aaron's was the first funeral, and in that one, there were people pouring in from across the world. And I was at the visitation. You'd have a small town, Louisiana, all the way up to the NYPD, Chicago PD rolling through. There was a flow for 3 or 4 hours straight of other departments coming in to honor our fallen in this event. You orchestrating that from the honor guard perspective, what did you learn as each progressed? Like, okay, we need to do this different. Was there anything that stands out that, okay, we need to tweak this based on the first going into the second?
At every funeral, every event you do, there's going to be things that when you step back. I did police memorial for years, and every time I did police memorial, then I'd write a note, go, okay, we screwed that up, or we didn't do this, or we need to do this next year because it didn't work out this year. Just little things, right? But when it came to dealing with the other agencies that came in, they're all wanting to help us. They're like, name it, we'll do it. And I almost felt like I was being rude. Thank you, we have it. Thank you, we have it. Because I kind of, in my mind, whether rightfully or not, I was thinking, we are the largest agency in this area. If we can't handle it, and I know they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They're wanting to help us, right? But what I found real quick is that if I picked a couple honor guards from other agencies and said, this is what I want you to do when we come out of this church, and which is basically get everybody lined up or create an aisle. Just create an aisle so we can walk down with the casket or however we're going to do it. Block everybody off. And you told them that, and they take the ball and run with it. And you didn't have to ask them. They didn't ask anymore. I say, hey, just get all the honor guards together over here, make a path, or we want y'all to stand here. Whatever you gave them, they were on it. And they were. If you ever, I know you were there, but if you ever see the overhead video of those funerals, I've never seen that many cops in one place ever, even to this day. And shout out to Troy Medina in Arlington, and we keep talking about Arlington. They were the best. They truly were the best, right? Keyword is were. Sorry, Troy. I don't think he runs it no more. But after July 7th, Dallas was the best. Hands down. We got more experience at this than anyone else now at this point.
You rise to the occasion in crisis, clearly.
Yeah.
Joe, how hard was it for you to see this happening in your city, in your department, and you had just been newly retired and knowing what the honor guard had ahead of them?
Yeah, I don't remember my involvement too much in that. I remember calling and offering my services, but I think with all the thing, I got left by the wayside because I would have done the same thing. When you're running something, you've got a vision, and people interfering with that vision tends to cause more problem than it does. So from that standpoint, I kind of said, hey, I'm here if you need me. If there's a job to do, let me know. But I didn't get directly involved. As far as the emotional part of it, it just hits you hard at different times. You'll go along just fine, but what officers are really good at is compartmentalizing, to where you understand the situation like Jeremy did with this. He knew what the situation was, so he compartmentalized that into, I've got to do this at this time. When that was over, that's when the real world comes back, and then the emotions come up. But like funerals and stuff like that, you're compartmentalized. You can't get emotionally involved in the family, or you'll end up hurting yourself because it's too emotional. When you're funeral after funeral after funeral, it'll just wear on you. So you compartmentalize. It's okay. This is my job. This isn't me. And then afterwards, you'll relive some of the experiences and work through them in an emotionally mature way. But if you get emotionally involved in every funeral, then you're going to get burned out really, really, really fast.
Did you know any of the fallen?
No, I didn't work with any of them. I was trying to remember. No, not directly.
Chief?
Yeah, I knew 2 of them.
Reed?
Knew Mike Smith, and that's who they gave me to do his funeral, take care of his funeral.
And take care of Heidi and the kids?
Yeah. I was sitting at home watching it on TV. About an hour into it, Mike Williams calls me and said, "Hey, buddy," I knew there was a catch there to the buddy part. "Could you come in and help us get started? We've never seen anything like this before."
No one has.
And 9 days later, I went home, pretty
believe it.
much. And then I went home, showered, cleaned up, packed a bag, taking my wife and granddaughter up to Branson, Missouri. We just got the hotel in Branson and Baton Rouge called and said, "We've lost 3.
3.
And they said, "You're the person to call. Can you come here now?" No. I mean, sometimes you have to say no. I mean, I couldn't leave them stranded there. So.
What was terrifying about just we're on the heels of just this happening here in Dallas, and then Baton Rouge happened. We were all worried that shit, this is the norm. We are under attack, and we didn't know when it was going to stop.
Hadn't headquarters happened?
It was a year before.
The headquarters was a year before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was June of the year before. After 7/7, after that, 13 events in 5 days. Chief, where was your role with the Honor Guard after that?
I quit again.
You quit again.
I quit from after that, and some internal things had occurred, and I got brought back in February. So I got another 6-month break. Now, granted, I was getting called a lot, just, what do we need to do here? That, just kind of advisor role, right? And then in February, I believe it was, February or March, I got brought back in again. And after February, it was mine again. It was my baby. But we did it a little different this time. I delegated a lot of the work that had burnt me out the first time, right? And I found Chris Anderson took over scheduling, right? He retired last year, I think. But that was such a load off my shoulders, and we never missed anything. He did it differently than I did, but I didn't care. It got done, right? And we started divvying up these tasks, which probably should have done long before that before I did burn myself out. But after that, then it was just like, okay, what do y'all want to do now, right? Because in my mind, I mean, I don't know how Denomy felt about it, but, Denomy probably got the Honor Guard to where he wanted it, right? And I had felt like I had gotten the Honor Guard to where I wanted. Like, we had all the gear. I couldn't even, I would, in my mind, I'd make purchasing once a year. Like, I'd buy stuff. What do we need? I had bought everything I could think of, right? Everything I could think of that we might need, want, or desire. And I'm sure there's a ton of other stuff out there. And I'm saying, like, we had the bugle recorders if Mark Lane couldn't be there, right? We had a fake bugle if we needed it, right? I was working on bagpipes for it. The same thing. We couldn't get Don Casey, like how do we do this? Silly things like that. We got us a Honor Guard. It was an old SWAT Tahoe, but we got us a vehicle finally, right? Which was a thing, right? I had taken it as far as I really wanted to go, or equipment wise, or I don't know what else to do with it, right? And there was a lot of talk about trying to make it full time, and it's like, well, the Honor Guard's always feast or famine, right? You can only train so much, on marching and flag folding. You can, and if you might do 3 funerals in a week, and then you might go 3 weeks without a funeral or without an event. So what do you do in between? Well, then you always got to remember the Honor Guard's got to be the priority. So there's certain jobs you just can't do because the Honor Guard's going to take priority over that. And we never could get real legs on how to do it full time. And probably some of the reason we couldn't get legs behind it because I never got behind it completely. Like, let's make this a full time unit, right? And no one ever convinced me that that's what we needed to do. And that's not saying I'm right. That was just my perspective of it. So we, did it for a couple more years and felt like I left it in good hands when I did.
I want to talk about real quick about the shelf life of doing that job. Obviously, both of y'all were immersed in that, running it and being a part of it for so long. Do you have an opinion on shelf life for doing that job?
As long as you wake up and still want to do it, you should go do it. If you wake up and go, crap, right, then it's a volunteer unit, right? If your heart's not in it, quit. Just quit. This is not like you're giving up on it. You're not giving up on your job. You're like, okay, let me step down, let someone else that might be more motivated to do this take over, or to just do the events. When I first took it over, I don't know if Joe remembers this or not, but we did a grand reopening colors event at Walmart. The Walmart been open for like 10 years. And like, why are we doing this? This is stupid. Why am I waking up at whatever time it was to go do this, right? And I get out there and we do it, and they presented us with a check at the end, the honor guard with a check. And I go, oh, well, this makes a little more sense now. But as a ground troop, I didn't know that. We've probably done plenty of colors events for silly stuff like that you're like, why are we here? This is dumb. This is not an honor guard function, but we're being told to go. And you try to explain it to people sometimes, that we're going because they do this, or they help us with this, or, a lot of times you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. So they might ask you for something silly to, hey, can you be here for this? We're having a symposium of, electrical computer programmers or something. And can y'all come put the colors out? And you're like, I guess. Why do you want police officers to do it? And then you look and you're like, oh, well, they make a donation every year to the honor guard. They're a supporter of us.
Buy you new jackets.
Yeah,
you don't have to wear
because,
Siobhan's.
Exactly, right. And at the time, the department wasn't paying for us to go to National Police Week, right? We had to pay for it out of our own funds. So you gotta raise money. Now the department, God bless them, has changed, and they're sending officers now on the department's dime, opposed to us having to try to raise money and sell hats or whatever we were trying to do to make money to send officers, because that's a big thing in the honor guard. If you've done all of this all year long, right? You want to go to National Police Week. You can't send but 4 or 5. I mean, you can't send everybody. But if you've never been to Police Week, you need to go. Even if you don't go for the festivities, if you go just for the name calling, just to listen to wherever they're holding it at, just to hear the names being called and all the officers that show up, and watch the family, because a grieving widow in Pennsylvania is the same as a grieving widow in Texas. They feel it the same way. Nothing changes. And you're like, okay, this brings us all together. Everybody knows what that's about, right? So that kind of thing, it's important, because you want the honor guard members to see this, that what they're doing is important and it matters. And there's a couple benefits. Don't get me wrong. Every year the Rangers and the Cowboys will ask for, an honor guard. They're going to put the flag out or do something at a game. And you're like, who is our highest performing person, right? And I want to send them. Go to the Cowboys game for free. Go out there and practice, do whatever you got to do, and then you get to watch the rest. You get to watch the whole game, all right? So there is a couple benefits to it. Now, there's only going to be one officer. It's not going to be everybody, but you got to reward them a little bit. So if they ever get to the point where they're tired of this job, all right, on the honor guard, I mean, it's a volunteer thing. Just quit doing it. All right. I mean, I tried to quit twice before they finally, and then the third time it finally stuck. All right.
You're like Murtaugh on Lethal Weapon. You're getting too old for that.
Yeah, I get too old for this shit.
I want to wrap this up with some final thoughts and takeaways. The part that you played in it. Reed, can you?
Well, I think as a family services officer, I said it earlier, it was the best job I ever had, and it was the worst job I ever had. But a lot of what the best was these two guys in here today, and the way that they would pick up the ball and run with it. And they may have been what-if guys, but if it hadn't been for the what-ifs, we'd had people stop in the middle of the church and stand there and go, Sergeant Denomy, what do I do next? Because they had some of those, you had to tell them what was going to happen. But some of the best people, and back to the 7-7, we took, in personnel, we took 2 recruiters or backgrounders, and they worked 6 a.m. till midnight in 2 shifts just answering the phone from outside agencies, because people were calling the chief's office. They didn't have a clue. They were calling dispatch. They were calling anywhere they could think of. So we were just referring them over to one number which is a rarity today if you've ever tried to call anybody. But it was just people like that picked it up, and you see what kind of people you work with.
Chief?
I was speaking to the current honor guard commander last week, and he's got some ideas, and he's actually implementing the ideas. And when I walked out of the conversation, I mean, I'll never tell him this. I guess he can hear it now if he wants to. But I was super proud. I'm like, okay, they're going in a direction. There's guidance. There's a plan, and I love a plan, right? Now, is he going to do things that I probably wouldn't have done? Sure. But there's someone that cares, and they're taking it forward, right? So I was beaming with pride. I'm like, I really am. I'm like, okay, I'm really, and I've been happy with him since I left, But I just some of the plans he had and some of the things he's done is stuff I would have never thought about. Also, I'm so glad that Joe Denomy started this thing, because I would have never been a part of it if they hadn't started it, because I didn't have the rank, right? Maybe I just started something when I finally had some rank. I don't know, but Joe started it. He laid the foundation. He built the house, right? And it's in the name alone. The honor guard. It's an honor. It truly is an honor. So I'm super proud of my time there. I'm super proud of all the officers that's been involved, and I got to give respect to those before me and those after me, because everybody's taking the ball and running with it.
Yeah, it all come down to service. When I started getting involved in the honor guard with SWAT and doing it, it was just one of those things is we need to honor these people in a way that's respectful to them. We can't have mistakes. We can't have things. And I just knew there was a better way to do it. Some of the people at funerals that really shouldn't be there, I said, there's just a better way. And when the honor guard came to me, I said, let's just go and see what happens. And when it finally came to fruition, it was all about service. It was all about, I want to honor these people who, whether they gave their lives or not, sacrificed whatever they needed to make this city a better place. And if we can't honor that, then what good are we? And when you looked around at all the other cities that had honor guards that were taking their business seriously, and I looked at how almost ad hoc ours was being done, so it was just something you had to do, not something you wanted to do. And when I got the opportunity, I guess the biggest benefit was all the people I got to meet. I'd have never met Jeremy. I'd have never met all the people on the honor guard had I not started it. And if you ever want to, so we got to train with the old guard. And if you ever want to feel good about this country, hang around those kids for a while. The energy that they bring. And that's kind of what it brought to me when I started the honor guard. I get these young kids that are just full of energy, and it energizes you because you see their commitment to serving and their commitment to helping other people and making it not about them but about the other families. And the big benefit of the honor guard is we're there. When you need us, we got it. That's one less thing for you to worry about. And we just made sure that the department is represented, and I didn't know that we were sending departments on the down now, because when I was here, you had to pay your own way to go to the police memorial, and that was always a sticking point that we couldn't send teams because our ceremony was on that day, and that just bugs me to today. But I'm glad that they finally saw the light and send representatives that when someone from around the country sees the Dallas Police Department, they see a professional unit, one that's doing what they should be doing. And that's kind of what I'm most proud about, that I'm so glad that they're going to D.C. and able to show off what they're doing.